Hey, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. Once again, I am your host, Will Figueroa, and this is another episode of Tiger's Den Live, where we help you stop scratching your way through life and truly start clawing your way to your success using the Tiger framework and that Tiger mindset, created by none other than the man next to me right here, Paul Routhier, the founder of ClevelandRain.com and the man behind the Tiger framework. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm really excited about today because as we continue to dive into the Tiger framework, and if you've been watching for a while now, we go into tenacity, right? Tiger is tenacity, inspire, generosity, execution, and then rejuvenation. And we dive deep every time we meet on one of those topics. Every time, just one level deeper, so that people could truly understand and really kind of sink their nails in as they claw their way to success for a better understanding of each subject. And today I'm excited because we get to speak about generosity and the lives of other people who have been generous to us and vice versa. And I would love for you to start it off. When you think of generosity, we spoke last in regards to, how you receive generosity is also how you give it. That's one of your Paulisms, if you will. Who's the person that comes to mind that you remember, oh yeah, this person gave me this, and because of that, I now do the same?
When you talk about that, who has made the most impact, I'm going to go way back.
Okay.
So, um, my eighth grade football coach.
Wow. Okay.
Though that was like 45 years ago or whatever it was. Um, ah, uh, I still remember him. He was both my high school football coach and my pitching coach in baseball. His name was Elmo Locks. Passed away a long time ago. But Elmo was generous to a fault. He would work with you. So there were 3 or 4 of us working on pitching, and it was December, up in the high school, and he would spend 2 hours every day after school working with us on pitching. I mean, he wasn't a paid coach or anything.
Yeah.
It's just he was helping, the guys who wanted to take the time to get better, and worked with us every day. And he had a significant impact. I think I've been pretty generous with my time specifically because of him.
Yeah.
And his dedication to the kids. And he's one of the reasons, in fact, he is the main reason that I coached football, and I coached baseball, and I coached downhill racing, skiing.
Amazing.
Yeah. Because of the impact he can have on the kids, getting them in the right mindset to execute, and building them. So yeah. I've been very generous with my time in the same ways that he has. And it's on the other side, we always say it needs to have it needs to have a result.
Yeah.
And the result is those kids playing ball and having fun and doing it to the best of their ability. And that's kind of like, I walk home with a warm heart, after a game. It's pretty much what I've done my entire life. So it really goes back to him. And I'm glad to be able to mention him on this cast.
Yeah, it's heartwarming, right? I remember a few teachers in my life, but the one that really kind of comes to mind for me, his name was Scott Schneider, and he was my English teacher, my high school English teacher. And I'll never forget the time that he took to help me understand truly how to read with comprehension. I struggled for many years, and I speak about it in speaking gigs, and I speak about it in other outlets, kind of about my upbringing and why there were so many difficulties. And he almost innately knew what was going on and what I valued. And immediately he knew that it wasn't so much mom who kind of ruled with an iron fist at home, but it was to make sure that dad knew that that I was trying to make him proud. And it was so true. It was so true. And so not only did he very quickly understand what I valued personally, but then he was able to tie in legacy. He was able to tie in what to be remembered for. He was able to tie in even my religion, my Catholic faith. And this was coming from a gentleman who grew up as a pretty traditional modern Jew. And for him to have taken the time to understand and to that for me was just outstanding. But then he takes it a step further, and he sees that I'm struggling. He sees that I'm having a hard time, and says, "Okay, what is going on, right?" And you speak about this all the time. He kind of had the Tiger framework, before it came about, right? And it comes to sage wisdom, right? And he sat down and he qualified, right? What is going on? Help me to understand how I can help you, how I can serve you, because clearly there's something going on. And I remember saying to Mr. Schneider, I'll never call him Scott. I don't know why we do that as students, right? I'll never call him by his first name. Always Mr. Schneider, right? I remember looking Mr. Schneider right in the face and saying, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. And then immediately leveraging my desire for stage work. I love doing like local plays and local productions. He said, well, what if you read it as if it was a script? How would you then get to understand the character then? And high school me, it's like, oh yeah, sure, I would just he brought out the answers within me that I had already. So he says, okay, well, great. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna give you the book, and then we're also gonna give you audio so that you can have an understanding of theme and who's speaking and why. And what I want you to do is I want you to speak to that character in your notes and start asking questions as if you were going to model these characters on stage. And I thought that was so weird. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Like, it's weird, but I think I could do that. Paul, when I tell you the next day I came back with like this many questions, like just a whole book's worth of why did the character do this? What was the intention? What was the motive? How did they do this? What, who was the author and where did they come from? And why did they put it this way when they should have done it this way? This is how it just flowed. And so anytime there was a question in regards to, one of the book that really started it off was Fahrenheit 451, a relatively difficult book to understand. And I'll never forget having a moment with him where he says, does anyone have any questions? And I raise my hand. I go, I got a ton. And he's like, good, because no one else did. And he knew that he was going to use me as a catalyst for the community impact. And in this case, it was the class. And then to find out that he did this for a handful of students. And he knew that he was kind of planting, kind of insiders, if you will, to be the catalyst for, mutual dialogue within the demographic. It's like, oh, wow, Will, how did, what happened? What did you, well, I don't know. I had a conversation with Mr. Schneider and he said to do this and that. And I thought it was cool because it reminded me of, and now the entire, class, the community is impacted because now we're speaking about the character and now we're making jokes. Now we're in the cafeteria and we're doing, literal jokes, jokes in the literacy of the book in which we're reading, and a whole culture starts breeding. And come to find out, this is what he's known for. I had no idea. And so I credit this man to my ability to read. Had it not been for Scott Schneider, I don't know if to this day I would be able to read. And in retrospect, and as we speak about it through the lens of the Tiger framework, he was absolutely tenacious. He was absolutely inspiring. He absolutely gave, right? He made sure that every kid was able to execute, including himself. And summer vacations, you couldn't find him. He understood the importance of rejuvenation because he knew that in his work was innately generous, right? As a teacher, there was a sense or foundation in which he felt was obligatory, I guess, to give in that way, in a very, very unique way. He to this day inspires me. Anytime I pick up a book, he's the person that I remember. Post-it notes. I have a very specific pen that I use because of him. I mean, all of it, all of it, all of it. Just the thought, much like your coach, my English teacher, Scott Schneider. I think of him, and he absolutely lights me up. Just the thought
Yep.
that he continues his legacy year over year over year is just fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing, and like I said, you don't remember very many teachers' names, but the ones who are generous with their time,
Yeah.
you do. You remember the ogres, and you remember the ones that were
Yeah.
very helpful, and it does, because that's a very impressionable age, and you get exposed. You talked about the way your family looked at generosity,
Yeah.
and the way mine very much similarly did. But then I go out into the community and I meet, an Elmo Locks and a Paul Baldwin, who really took the time. He was my football coach. He was the
Wow.
head coach, and always took the time to spend extra time. If you wanted it, all you had to do was ask, and they were there for you. And I've really enjoyed over the years being the part of that coaching aspect, that mindset of looking at others, finding what is great about them, what their genius is, and then helping them maximize that talent is an extremely rewarding experience. I was actually working with a client yesterday, and he asked very much the same question,
Mm.
wrapped around why I do this.
Yeah.
And I went into the coaching story and where I came up, and that I had actually retired. And after a summer of golf and being bored, I said, I need something better to do. What can I do? And then I'm like, I love to coach. I do. Let's do it at a business level. Let's be generous with our time and help other entrepreneurs get their things in order so that they can become successful. And it's been very rewarding already.
Yeah.
And I just, and spending the time with other people and being generous with my time all around has been very rewarding over my career.
Yeah. You speak of finding their genius or using their genius, and I'm reminded of a manager that I once had. I think he was a director. I forget. It was a pretty small company, but boy, did they have the revenue. And his name was Mark Goodman. And Mark was, to me, brilliant in that he allowed for that exploration. I think he caught me in a season in my life where I was truly finding myself and getting into my own. And this was during a time where I was really transitioning my career from hardcore IT into training, into technical education, into broadcasting like this. So live webinars, seminars, really kind of coming into my own in regards to what we do now for a living. And he was just so brilliant and arguably nuts for being able to do it, because I don't know if he necessarily had permission to allow for me to experiment with certain software or certain technologies, or but he was so brilliant in that he understood the political realm and allowed for the leverage of that political science, if you will, to say, yeah, you know what? We hired a young kid at the time. It was the youngest hire in, I think, like 3 decades. Like, you hired this kid for a reason, right? Because things were stale, because things were not being produced, because things were let's bring in what he's exposed to. Let's bring in how he learns and how his colleagues and friends learn, so that then we could take that and really evangelize the product or service offering, right? Everything within the organization. And I remember being in those meetings and having a major bigwig and owner of this multi-billion dollar pharmaceutical company uh, being in the room and asking some like really hard technical questions. And then I'll never forget the VP, the CTO, excuse me, the CTO of this multi-billion dollar organization sits down and says to me, what are some of the things that you wish you would have been able to learn? And so I go into, I wish I would have been able to learn in this way. It wasn't what I wanted to learn, it was the way I learned it. Because I did learn what I needed to learn, whether it's, the technology at hand or for, the skill set I needed for that job. But I wish it was just a little bit different. And I explained how Harvard was doing their virtual sessions and how I went to school in one session or one semester was through an articulation program through multiple universities, simulcasting a single university professor from a completely different part of the world, connecting all of these different cohorts of universities together, where instead of just maybe 20 or 30 students in a room, now we're talking 2,000, right? Like really maximizing time and space and technology. And I thought that was really cool. And I found it very effective because of my ability to be able to raise my hand. And if the professor in, I don't know, in Tokyo was able to see me, right? Like they had technologies in place to be able to know that a student was raising their hand, I would get recognized. And I mean, just the thought of, I am a kid in New York raising my hand to a university professor halfway around the world and asking this like that ability was inspiring to me. And so when I came back with that and I answered that, it was him and Mark Goodman who said that's the reason why we need to keep him. It's not because he's too modern. It's not because he's young, or it's because he's thinking in ways that allow for communication to scale. Mark Goodman was someone who allowed for me to experiment, to understand that it's important to make mistakes. And like a good leader, any mistake that was made, he first and foremost, he let me know, like, hey, dude, like, here's why. This is why we're not going to do this again, right? This is, here are the liabilities, or here's this and that, right? Not that I did anything, extravagant, but a lot of times it was because of policy. And so what was amazing about Mark Goodman was that he knew that in leadership and in giving, that sometimes you have to take a bit of the brunt, that there's a level of protection that you have to allow for the student or for the learner to make those mistakes, so that whoever is teaching, whoever is giving, allows for a little bit of the brunt to be on them, but also to allow for the student to learn about that mistake safely. He brought me into a world of political science. He brought me into a world of business travel. I had no idea the what to do on business travel. What does it mean, business class? I thought you just get on a plane, or I thought, it's like, no. There's a company car, and when you see John, you make sure, right? Like there was these things that I just wasn't exposed to. I was leaving my suburban house of New York, going into, this multi-billion. It was a completely different world. It was a completely different world. I'm here driving my little Fiat 500, and I got Maybachs, and I got BMWs, and I have Rolls Royces, And he says, well, here's why you park here. It's not because of your car. It's not because it's because of this. These people have earned this, and they're giving, and they're blah, 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 blah. And that's why you park here. He showed me respect. He showed me, I can't emphasize enough that political science, knowing how to deal with people, was someone that he just, like, he understood innately. He understood where his role was. And in that he just constantly gave. He goes, well, in my time, this is what happened. And in my time, that, why don't you try this? I'll tell them that, we're going to try this. It's a pilot program and we're going to do this, this, and this. Keep the cost low. If you could stay within this budget, we'll allow it. And for him to be able to you talk about remembering the best and remembering the ogres, right? To me, he was in leadership and in business. He was by far the best because for me, he wasn't. There's a difference in polishing something and chiseling something. And Mark Goodman, as a leader, had the ability to both chisel and then polish, and was able to do it really fast. Like, regardless of people who came in, he knew to leverage strengths against weaknesses. He understood when to be inspiring, when to give. He, to me, definitely exuded true leadership in my opinion. And in that was just this constant, generous heart of his. And I can't speak highly enough about him.
Yeah, you bring together an image for me as you're speaking about that. One of my favorite images, if you've ever seen a Marine troop or a recon troop scale a wall, you'll see them stack up on top of each other's shoulders.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Yes. So, and the reason that comes to mind is it's like you're always looking as an entrepreneur for a hand up, right?
Right.
You're looking for, to meet that person that's going to help you hit the next level. And some entrepreneurs forget to drop the other hand down and bring someone else up with them. And you're explaining a person that does that. For example, there's some things that you said today that are really apropos. I'm in the middle of training my assistant to become a project manager. So I'm generous with my time, an extra couple hours every week off hours. I'm working through the project management framework with them. And you said, basically what you said is that he delegated responsibility to you,
Yeah.
right? He delegated responsibility. You can delegate responsibility, but you can't delegate accountability. You can only share it.
Wow.
Right. And that's kind of the caveat there. He gave you the latitude to do what you did, but when you, for lack of a better term, made a mistake,
yeah,
or an oversight, he shared the accountability with you. He had to eat crow too, because
maybe a little more than he would have liked in some cases.
But it's a good thing to think about when you're handing off projects and tasks to other people, and even when you're the CEO, you can delegate that, but ultimately the CEO is responsible or accountable for the entire organization, and you can't delegate that.
Yeah,
you can only delegate the responsibilities. So it is beneficial to be generous with your time with your team, because the tighter you are with them, the more they accept that responsibility and accept the accountability that is shared throughout the organization.
Yeah, you spoke last time, Paul, that opportunity comes from generosity. If it's truly generous, if it truly comes from the heart, you mean what, good intentions, healthy generosity. That with healthy generosity, opportunity comes from that. And for me, what ended up happening was, after working with Mark, someone said within the team that, what you're doing with Mark is an industry in and of itself. Do you know this? I said, no, I have no idea. I'm putting learning management systems together. I'm putting curriculum together. We're scaling it for the entire enterprise. We're doing, in-person training, virtual training, hybrid training. We're doing micro courses. In retrospect, I'm having the time of my life, right? Because we're really kind of exploring this idea of adult learning in a modern world at the time. And this person says to me, yeah, it's called instructional design. It's called learning operations at the C-level. And one of the C-level execs came up and said, you're doing great work. Like I'll never forget that. And that in turn created an opportunity. Unfortunately, the company didn't do well a few years later, and I started seeing some of the flags on the wall. And Mark, being Mark, he kind of saw it too, and he said, "Hey, kid, you need to brush up the resume a little bit. It seems like things aren't going to look too good for the company." And I thought, okay, cool. And I started applying to different things, and that was the first time that my resume, and I'll never forget, my resume changed from a fully, IT kind of focused. At one point, I was a technology evangelist, right? It was my job to ensure that people could work anytime, anywhere, on any device, right? This is pre-pandemic, of course, right? This is before it was cool to be remote, right? And I'll never forget that because of the opportunities that Mark gave me, it then created new opportunities for me to then work for another Fortune 50 company instead of one of these big pharmas, but really high up there, and work in instructional design. And that changed my life. That opportunity allowed for me to move my family, start a family, have our daughter. I mean, move from the Northeast down to Florida, where we are now. Had it not been for Mark Goodman and his generosity in teaching and his patience and everything else that went along with his time, I would not be where I am today. I owe him a big chunk of my career because of him. Talk to me about how opportunity often comes from generosity. What are some examples, or what is someone that comes in regards to that?
Well, I'll just go down to being a football coach and offering that time up for free.
Yeah,
The parents could see that, who I was with their kids, and then they found out what I did for a living, and I ended up with 6, 7 accounts from my consulting agency while I was doing that while I was coaching.
amazing.
They just, we want you to, coach our team.
Yeah,
Since you're, a business consultant, come in. They saw the way I was working with the kids, and they could immediately identify how I worked with adults.
yeah,
And so it was just exposure. I had no clue that any of the parents were entrepreneurs or had businesses or departments. I didn't know what they did for a living until they came up and talked with me, because they knew I was a coach, but that wasn't what I was.
yeah,
And it's interesting. Like the head coach of a high school football team, it's a paid position. It's it may or may not be their primary function, but everybody sees them as a coach. People were seeing me a little bit differently.
yeah. That's interesting.
And as I talked to the parents, opportunities came. Honestly, in every endeavor, and when you work with people, you help them solve. You and I are both problem solvers. It's like we hear a problem and we have the fix, and
Yes,
let me help you out. I can fix that. I
right.
can help you fix that. So a lot of times, whether it was sitting in a bar when I was younger and getting into a conversation, there was a problem that came up, and I had some information to help them out. Here you go. Here's the information. So many opportunities came from that. I mean, most recently, I was in Miami meeting with you, and I got into a conversation at a bar. It was
Yes.
yeah, you know this one. Um, and we just started talking about the CFO startup company. Here's the problems that they were running into. I offered up, you know, real help as opposed to trying to sell them anything.
Right.
And we're still in touch today. And there's a very large opportunity down the road from that company as they start building out their force.
Yeah.
And and it had nothing. I wasn't sitting at the bar trying to get, I was just like having dinner and got into
Right.
a conversation,
Right. Right.
and I just offered help, and that's coming from generosity. So
Yeah.
ultimately, the big takeaway from that is that generosity is a piece of the puzzle of who you are, right? It's not a specific. If you're operating out of a platform of generosity, You just give. And then, I hate to go biblical, but I'm going to, if you give, it'll come back tenfold. And that is absolutely true. Sometimes it's not going to come back, but on average, it's going to come back tenfold. If you continuously are giving to create a result for the person that you're giving to, you understand what the outcome needs to be, you'll find yourself in interesting situations and huge opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's the big difference between, healthy generosity and maybe not so healthy generosity, right? It's like when people give with an expectation versus people who give just to give without expectation. I think the best examples are the people that we've spoken about, right? Like people who give their time without expectation.
Well, I want to jump in on that because there
Please.
should be an expectation, but
Okay.
people have the wrong expectation.
Okay,
right?
Cool. Tell me about it.
Okay. The expectation that's not right is an expectation in return.
Sure. A quid pro quo.
Quid pro quo. But there should be an expectation and a discussion about outcomes. You should understand the outcome of your generosity. Okay. You want to give to an outcome.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, there should be expectations, but it's where those expectations are placed that's very important. There's an unhealthy placement of expectations, and there's a healthy placement of expectations.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Is it then important to reflect on that impact, or do you just move on? Like if I know that I'm going to give, say I give to, local boys club or, local church or whatever the case may be, right? Is it important for me, like some of the other actions that we have both in life and business, to follow up on that impact, like to follow up on that action, or do I not bother? Do I ensure that my giving is impactful in and of itself, or do I give and then do I go, what did you do with it? How do I guess the question is, do I put a spotlight on the impact that I created from giving? Is it right or wrong to put a spotlight on the impact that I created by giving?
So I'm not talking about charitable donations and money, because to me, money is lazy, right? This is a giving of your time, right? I'm talking about, going to the boys club and coaching a bunch of kids to an effective outcome. And yes, you should reflect. Could you have done it better? What could you do differently?
Okay.
What was the impact? Did I get the impact that I was looking for? Same as any type of project. You should always understand the outcome of any charitable giving. And I'm going to use, there's a big thing on the news right now about the U.S. government giving $250 million to feed children here in Minnesota, and that 48 people are arrested now for defrauding the government of $250 million, right? And more importantly, $250 million of pandemic food didn't get to children that needed it, right? Because the government failed. They failed to understand the impact and the outcome. They did not manage that.
Got it.
They gave without understanding the impact.
Oh, interesting. So not only should you give with an expectation of result, but you should also give with an expectation or an understanding of impact, right? There should be not only an intention, but there should also be an expected outcome. Is that, am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, there's a simple piece with my kids, with my wife, with everybody I do business with. There's a simple 3 words: trust but verify.
Yes.
Right. And that's the big thing. You want to have that impact. You want your effort. You're applying resources, whether it's your time, even your money, or other resources, or you're donating stuff, you want to verify that it's being used in the way that you intended for it to be given.
Love that.
You have to do that, because then otherwise it's a nebulous idea. Did you
Yeah.
have it? Did you have impact? You don't know, right?
Yeah.
Even if I, give advice or give coaching to someone, I'll follow up with them because I want to know that it worked. And
Right.
if it didn't work, I want to know why, so that I'm not giving out bad information, right? So if
Right.
you give something bad out, it's of no use to anyone, or
Right.
it could be, it could have a negative impact. So yeah, from all perspectives, trust but verify.
I love that. And you speak, or you've spoken about in previous episodes when we speak about generosity, about really understanding the importance of when you go in to give generously, whether it's your time, or even money, but understanding that level of accountability with that too. That specifically in regards to time, that when you give, to understand how you give, the process in which you give, and to your point, right, follow up on that. Was it a positive charitable impact, whether it's time, money, skill, or any combination thereof? And I love what you spoke about last time, that even in building a business, it starts with generosity, right? Because you're finding the problem, you're trying to solve the problem, and it's in by being generous and then ultimately transitioning into a business, solving that problem, that it allows for you to refine that process of giving. It allows you to refine the actions in which you give, and how you give. And I think it's a great way to kind of come full circle, right? Because we spoke about how you receive generosity is also how you give it. And for me, I never thought, and it's very impactful for me personally, I never thought that it was important to circle back, to refine, to understand, well, how can I maximize this gift? We spoke about this last time, right? In my head, giving was money. Giving was maybe time, but it was definitely, when I heard generosity and I heard charity, like I thought money. And that was because of the way that I was raised, right?
Mm.
I continue to dive into the Tiger framework, and as I begin to really take on the spirit of generosity and understanding what's involved, well, first of all, I can't thank you enough. But secondly, I never thought to go back, like anything else in business and in life, that in generosity, to refine generosity in order to maximize a positive impact in the community or the demographic at hand. That to me is brilliant, because that's what we all want, right? We want to make sure that when we do give, that we have the biggest impact possible, right? So um, to bring that to light, to bring that to the table, I don't think there's many people, regardless if you're C-level or you're just starting, or even in your own personal life, I don't think many people understand the power of refining generosity, and that you should go back and assess, well, how did you give and what was the impact, and follow through. That to me was that to me is amazing. Really quickly, because I am conscious of time. What's an example that you can give us, that you gave, there was a moment of generosity, and you found that in refinement you can make changes and even have a bigger impact? What is a generous act that you've seen, or that you've done yourself, that they went back, refined that action, and it was multiplicative?
Yeah, so I mean that's almost every day, because as I'm working with entrepreneurs and we're working through their advice, I learn, right?
Mm,
So I learn market impacts, people impacts, all of those type of things, and I'm assessing their point of view and my point of view on those impacts. There is things that you suggest that people do, and they come back and they run into a new barrier that that you have. We all have lenses we're looking through, and when you look through a lens, you also have blind spots, right?
yeah.
So a coach's job is to pick out the blind spots for you, block and tackle, give you ways, help you determine ways to either go through the obstacle or around the obstacle. And some of these guys have amazing ideas on getting through those obstacles and over them, and they're right on the bucket. And of course, I'm refining every day
Of
as,
course.
oh, wow. Because the one thing about a coach, he doesn't know everything. That's,
Yeah.
there's a sense that you have to know everything, and that's not the case. It's also that you're a conduit for great ideas. A good coach will take every coaching session, analyze it, and go, oh wow, there's a new play. It's like sitting on the sidelines watching football, and you see a play that works over and over again, and the defenses aren't set up to deal with that play. Then you're reviewing that, and you're going to the coach, or you're reviewing tapes to make your play better. It's all about review, refine. And there's model, mimic, and master.
Right.
There's more to that. It's
Yeah.
model, mimic, master, analyze, modify, master. Okay, so it's because the environment changes, is not static. Okay, and what worked yesterday may not work today. So that model, mimic, and master also needs to have analyze the results, come up with new game plan, and execute.
I love
Right?
that. I love that.
So,
To refine increases your reach is what I'm
mhm.
hearing. I love that. I love that. To refine your actions, even in generosity, will increase your reach, and in turn, the impact will be multiplicative. Amazing.
And be more efficient, right? If
Yeah.
you can be more effective with less effort, right? Effort versus impact. This is something I've said for 30 years. Effort versus impact. If I can keep the effort low and the impact high,
Yeah.
I am more efficient.
Yeah.
So this amount of effort is creating this amount of impact. I analyze and I go, I can do it more efficiently, less effort, same or more impact. That's exactly what you're looking for in all endeavors.
Love it. Love it. And it teases next time we meet, because we're going to go right into execution, which is the E in Tiger, and how can we be more efficient in our execution. So I love that. Paul, as always, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you've put together. Thank you for the work that you do, not only in your own community, but for your clients, with me selfishly, right? Like, it has been absolutely amazing to see the generosity, to hear about it. And now I get to understand that I get to refine it and reach for even a bigger impact. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you haven't already booked time with this amazing man and his team, head on over to clevelandrain.com. Get the Tiger framework instilled and installed in your company, in your organization, or even just in your personal life, so you could stop scratching your way blind and really start clawing, sinking your nails in and clawing towards the success that you deserve. We will be back next time speaking about execution. And as always, we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.